It's no surprise to many people that I like a pint. I particularly like rather quirky pints like speciality ciders and draft real ales, the sort of things you get in Wetherspoons. However, I will never go in a Wetherspoons pub again. And there's a reason for that. It's a very straightforward reason. At the start of the lockdown, Tim Martin, Chief Executive of Wetherspoons, did two things that I greatly object to. The first was that he went on record without any way of saying that Wetherspoons pubs were safe and nobody had ever contracted COVID-19 by being in a Wetherspoons pub. There was, of course, no way that he could possibly have known this. And it demonstrated that he put his own profit before the lives of his customers.
Our aim is for pubs open for the duration. This could go on for a long time, and I think that once you shut them down, it's very difficult. Supermarkets are very, very crowded. Pubs are much less crowded. There's hardly been any transmission of the virus within pubs, and I think it's over the top to shut them. That's a commercial view, but I think it's also a common sense view.
But when lockdown actually began, he did something else, demonstrating that he put his own profit before the livelihoods of his staff, many of whom had worked there loyally for many years and were on minimum wage, so not exactly doing very well anyway. He had the opportunity to furlough those staff. The government would pay 80% of his wages, and he had only to find an extra 20%.
Calls from supermarkets. Tesco alone want 20,000 people to join them. That's half the number of people who work in our pubs. If I'm being honest, I say you can get the furlough payments and stay at home. If you're offered a job at a supermarket, many of you will want to do that. If you think it's a good idea, do it. I can completely understand it. If you've worked for us before, I promise you we'll give you first preference if you want to come back, and we all obviously completely understand that you don't want to wait around for us to reopen.
He told them to go and work for Tesco's. Well, okay, fair enough. It's an idea. For that reason, I will not drink in Wetherspoons again. Now, there is an argument that's made about this, and I want to be really clear about my thinking on it. There's a reasonable, valid argument which says that if we boycott Wetherspoons, we will also, if we have any impact at all, impact upon those very same staff who will lose their jobs. And yes, that's true. But I would argue that their jobs are clearly not secure anyway. They're also minimum wage. Many of them are zero contract as well. So actually, they're not really jobs that I would argue are fair to the people in them. But leaving that aside, if we don't have some sort of impact on employers who do things like this, there is no reason for them to change. There's no reason for them to stop doing things like this. And we're not doing this, those of us who boycott Wetherspoons, and there are many of us who've said we won't use Wetherspoons again, we're not doing this to hurt Tim Martin. We're doing this to send a message to other employers who may decide to do something like this in the future. Because the only way that we will stop people being so cynical and treating their workers so badly is by ensuring that there is a consequence to that. The government's not going to give them a consequence, so it needs to be a social consequence. And I'm reminded of the time when I was a young adult in the 1980s, when the Western world imposed sanctions upon South Africa because of the apartheid regime. Our government wasn't particularly keen on the sanctions. Certainly the South African government wasn't keen on the sanctions, and the South African Prime Minister, Pik Botha at the time, counselled us that if we create sanctions against South Africa, we will be hurting the workers, the poor black people in South Africa, many of whom in the townships were on subsistence wages, but quite frankly, they were going to be on subsistence wages whatever we did. What's interesting is that the black workers themselves, represented by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, pleaded with the international community not to lift the sanctions because they understood that this is a long game and you will not break an abusive system, be it apartheid or Wetherspoons' approach to their staff, by thinking in short term only. They knew that it would create hardship, but they asked that sanctions continued anyway, and most of the countries of the world continued those sanctions, and apartheid fell a few years later. So I say, boycott Wetherspoons. Not because I want to hurt the staff, but because I want to help all working people, including Wetherspoons staff. Because let's face it, being a 0 hours contract barman or barmaid or whatever the term, the politically correct term might be now, is not a career. 0 hours contracts are not the thing you want to be doing for the rest of your life. They'll be looking at other jobs later anyway. What we need to do is demonstrate to the cynical employers that they can't get away with treating people so badly.